after all the declarations and after all the preamble to inspections, that he's got to show the world he's disarming. And that's where we'll be next. Judy.
Thank you, Mr. President. You said this afternoon that the UN Security Council vote tomorrow would bring the civilized world together against Iraq. But broad opposition remains all over the world to your policy. Will you continue to try to build support? If so, how will you do that? Or do you think that a Security Council vote would be all the mandate you need?
Yeah. First of all, broad opposition around the world, not in support of my policy on Iraq? Yes, well, I think most people around the world realize that Saddam Hussein is a threat. And no one likes war, but they also don't like the idea of Saddam Hussein having a nuclear weapon. Imagine what would happen. And by the way, we don't know how close he is to a nuclear weapon right now. We know he wants one, but we don't know.
This is a struggle against evil, against an enemy that rejoices in the murder of innocent, unsuspecting human beings. President Bush has often spoken of how America can keep the peace by redefining war on our terms. But for all the progress we've made in the war on terror, one thing is abundantly clear. Our nation is still in danger. There is also a grave danger that al-Qaeda or other terrorists will join with outlaw regimes that have these weapons to attack their common enemy, the United States of America. That is why confronting the threat posed by Iraq is not a distraction from the war on terror. It is absolutely crucial to winning the war on terror.
Will you be able to look at that and tell whether they're telling the truth and being forthcoming, or will you be able to tell right away that you're on a path to war with Iraq?
Well, the latter is, of course, a decision for the President, the Security Council, other countries to make judgments about. It's not for me. The United States knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. The UK knows that they have weapons of mass destruction. Any country on the face of the earth with an active intelligence program knows that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction.
The President has said that Iraqi cooperation is not encouraging yesterday, and Kofi Annan today says cooperation seems to be good by the Iraqis.
Is the glass half empty, half full?
Well,
I don't see that's a big deal.
You don't?
No.
Mr. Secretary?
I mean, they seem to be doing what is being asked of them by inspectors, and by that, Kofi Annan says cooperation seems to be good. Why is cooperation not good?
You'd have to ask the President.
They're letting people in.
Maybe he's looking at intelligence that somebody else isn't seeing. I don't know.
But I want to remind people that Saddam Hussein, the choice is his to make as to whether or not the Iraqi situation is resolved peacefully. You said we're headed to war in Iraq. I don't know why you say that. I hope we're not headed to war in Iraq. I'm the person who gets to decide, not you. And I hope this can be done peacefully. We've got a military presence there to remind Saddam Hussein, however, that when I say we will lead a coalition of the willing to disarm him if he chooses not to disarm, I mean it. Yet if force becomes necessary to secure our country and to keep the peace, America will act deliberately. America will act decisively. And America will prevail because we've got the finest military in the world.
Specific to the Persian Gulf, the flow of forces to the region continues. You've seen a few units depart for the Gulf and can expect that deliberate force flow to continue. And while there has been no decision about Iraq, we want to ensure that we are prepared to provide the President as much flexibility as possible.
They say we should not go to war against Iraq. I would just like to ask you this morning, what do you say to those people?
What I would say to them is that the President is trying every means not to go to war, but the decision to go to war is in the hands of Saddam Hussein.
Well, Mr. Blix has said that it may take several months more to come to some sort of definitive conclusion about whether he has disarmed it or not. President Chirac of France said yesterday, and these are his words, "Wisdom requires that we grant the inspector's request for more time."
What we have to make a judgment on now is whether or not Saddam Hussein is serious about disarming, and is he cooperating with the inspectors in that disarmament process.
So just to make sure I understand what you're saying a lack of cooperation would be reason enough to take military action.
What I'm saying is that Iraq has an obligation under 1441 and earlier resolutions to disarm. And one way to demonstrate that they are disarmed or are going to disarm is to cooperate with the inspectors and help the inspectors do their job. Time is running out.
What should the public know right now about what a war with Iraq would look like and what the cost would be?
Cost in dollars or cost in lives?
Dollars and human costs.
Mm-hmm. Well, the lesser important is the cost in dollars. Human life is a treasure. Office of Management and Budget estimated it would be something under $50 billion.
Outside estimates say up to $300 billion.
Baloney.
His final chance to disarm. He has shown instead utter contempt for the United Nations and for the opinion of the world. The 108 UN inspectors were not sent to conduct a scavenger hunt for hidden materials across a country the size of California. The job of the inspectors is to verify that Iraq's regime is disarming. It is up to Iraq to show exactly where it is hiding its banned weapons, lay those weapons out for the world to see, and destroy them as directed. Nothing like this has happened. The United Nations concluded in 1999 that Saddam Hussein had biological weapons sufficient to produce over 25,000 liters of anthrax, enough doses to kill several million people. The United Nations concluded that Saddam Hussein had material sufficient to produce more than 38,000 liters of botulinum toxin, enough to subject millions of people to death by respiratory failure. The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa. Our intelligence sources tell us that he has attempted to purchase high-strength aluminum tubes suitable for nuclear weapons production. The dictator of Iraq is not disarming. To the contrary, he is deceiving. Intelligence sources indicate that Saddam Hussein has ordered that scientists who cooperate with UN inspectors in disarming Iraq will be killed, along with their families. International human rights groups have cataloged other methods used in the torture chambers of Iraq. Electric shock, burning with hot irons, dripping acid on the skin, mutilation with electric drills, cutting out tongues, and rape. If this is not evil, then evil has no meaning. Before September the 11th, many in the world believed that Saddam Hussein could be contained. But chemical agents, lethal viruses, and shadowy terrorist networks are not easily contained. Imagine those 19 hijackers with other weapons and other plans, this time armed by Saddam Hussein. Take one vial, one canister, one crate, slipped into this country to bring a day of horror like none we have ever known. We will do everything in our power to make sure that that day never comes.
Is the existence of mobile production facilities used to make biological agents. We have diagrammed what our sources reported about these mobile facilities. Here you see both truck and rail car mounted mobile factories. As these drawings, based on their description, show, we know what the fermenters look like. We know what the tanks, pumps, compressors, and other parts look like. We know how they fit together. We know how they work. And we know a great deal about the platforms on which they are mounted. We know from Iraq's past admissions that it has successfully weaponized not only anthrax, but also other biological agents, including botulinum toxin, aflatoxin, and ricin. Saddam Hussein has investigated dozens of biological agents, causing diseases such as gas gangrene, plague, typhus, tetanus, cholera, camelpox, and hemorrhagic fever. And he also has the wherewithal to develop smallpox. In May 2002, our satellites photographed the unusual activity in this picture. Here we see cargo vehicles accompanied by a decontamination vehicle associated with biological or chemical weapons activity. This photograph of the site, taken 2 months later in July, shows that this previous site, as well as all of the other sites around the site, have been fully bulldozed and graded in order to conceal chemical weapons evidence that would be there from years of chemical weapons activity. Saddam Hussein is determined to get his hands on a nuclear bomb. He is so determined that he has made repeated covert attempts to acquire high-specification aluminum tubes from 11 different countries, even after inspections resumed. It goes on and on and on. Clearly, Saddam Hussein and his regime will stop at nothing until something stops him.
With ranges far beyond what is permitted by the Security Council, a UAV launched from a vessel off the American coast could reach hundreds of miles inland. And we have sources that tell us that Saddam Hussein recently authorized Iraqi field commanders to use chemical weapons, the very weapons the dictator tells the world he does not have.
The decision has been made to increase the threat condition designation currently classified at elevated risk to increase that threat condition designation to the high-risk category. This decision for an increased threat condition designation is based on specific intelligence received and analyzed by the full intelligence community.
United Nations troops in Iraq, triple the number of inspectors, and give inspections a longer time. Could you accept that proposal?
The issue is not more inspectors. The issue is compliance on the part of Saddam Hussein. If he complies, if he does what he's supposed to do and tells us where the anthrax went, where did the botulinum toxin go, where did all the missiles go, where's the mustard gas, where are all of the documents you've been hiding? If he complies, then that can be done with a handful of inspectors. But if he is not complying, tripling the numbers of inspectors doesn't deal with the issue.
As you remember, in 1991, the Persian Gulf War, the Kuwaiti ambassador to the U.S.'s daughter came forward with a fake story. There were suggestions of satellite photos showing 250,000 Iraqi troops on the Saudi border, which the St. Petersburg Times demonstrated was not correct. And now this headline about Britain's intelligence dossier. Britain admits that much of its report on Iraq came from magazines. Are you concerned that there's a sloppiness with evidence and a rush to war?
No, I don't think so. I think Britain stands behind its document. They have acknowledged that they use other sources that they didn't acknowledge or attribute. But I think the document stands up well because it describes a pattern of deceit on the part of the Iraqis that is not just a pattern of deceit that exists today, but has existed for many years.
World press and others can go in and assess the situation. Is it your judgment that there will be clearly caches of weapons of mass destruction which will dispel any doubt that the United States and such other nations that joined in the use of force did the right thing at the right time?
Sir, I think we will find caches of weapons of mass destruction. Absolutely.
Are you and your folks planning for a ferocious war? I mean, an all-out defense by the Iraqi military?
The task of war planners is to plan for every conceivable contingency, and they are doing that, from the most pessimistic to the most optimistic.
And America's belief in liberty both lead in the same direction, to a free and peaceful Iraq. A new regime in Iraq would serve as a dramatic and inspiring example of freedom for other nations in the region. America will seize every opportunity in pursuit of peace. And the end of the present regime in Iraq would create such an opportunity. We will make this an age of progress and liberty. Free people will set the course of history, and free people will keep the peace of the world.
Such is the notion that it will take several 100,000 U.S. troops to provide stability in post-Saddam Iraq are wildly off the mark. These are Arabs, 23 million of the most educated people in the Arab world, who are going to welcome us as liberators. And when that message gets out to the whole Arab world, it is going to be powerful counter to Osama bin Laden.
The question simply is, has Saddam Hussein made a strategic decision, a political decision, that he will give up these horrible weapons of mass destruction and stop what he's been doing for all these many years? That's the question. There is no other question. Everything else is secondary or tertiary. That's the issue.
Conversations I had with leaders in the region afterwards, they all supported the decision that was made not to go to Baghdad. They were concerned that we not get into a position where we shifted, instead of being the leader of an international coalition, to roll back Iraqi aggression to one in which we were an imperialist power, willy-nilly moving into capitals in that part of the world, taking down governments.
Imperialist power, moving willy-nilly, taking down governments. Is that how we're going to be perceived this time?
Well, I hope not, Tim. And of course, in '91, there was a general consensus that we'd gone as far as we should, that we'd achieved our objectives when we liberated Kuwait.
If your analysis is not correct, and we're not treated as liberators but as conquerors, and the Iraqis begin to resist, particularly in Baghdad, do you think the American people are prepared for a long, costly, and bloody battle with significant American casualties?
Well, I don't think it's likely to unfold that way, Tim, because I really do believe we will be greeted as liberators.
Why not just keep the pressure on, keep the troops there, keep the threat going, and continue to let the inspectors destroy weapons?
Because we know you can't keep the troops there forever. And right now, without a strategic decision on the part of Saddam Hussein to comply, I'm as sure as of anything I've ever been sure of, if the pressure comes off, he will go back to his old pattern of behavior.
Have you effectively given up trying to get 9 affirmative votes among the 15 members of the Security Council?
I don't want to rule out any option that might be available to us right now, because this is what the leaders are discussing in the Azores this afternoon.
So is it still possible there might yet be another UN Security Council vote?
It is the option, one of the options that is available.
We concluded that tomorrow is a moment of truth for the world. Many nations have voiced a commitment to peace and security, and now they must demonstrate that commitment to peace and security in the only effective way, by supporting the immediate and unconditional disarmament of Saddam Hussein.
From the perspective of the security of the world, we cannot simply go back to the Security Council. For this discussion to be superseded by that discussion, to be superseded by another discussion.
When you say tomorrow is the moment of truth, does that mean tomorrow is the last day that the resolution can be voted up or down, and at the end of the day tomorrow, one way or another, the diplomatic window has closed?
That's what I'm saying. My fellow citizens, events in Iraq have now reached the final days of decision. The United Nations Security Council has not lived up to its responsibilities, so we will rise to ours. In recent days, some governments in the Middle East have been doing their part. They have delivered public and private messages urging the dictator to leave Iraq so that disarmament can proceed peacefully. He has thus far refused. All the decades of deceit and cruelty have now reached an end. Saddam Hussein and his sons must leave Iraq within 48 hours. Their refusal to do so will result in military conflict, commenced at a time of our choosing. For their own safety, all foreign nationals, including journalists and inspectors, should leave Iraq immediately. American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to